What is up, Rangers and overall hockey fans? Thank you all so much for coming back for another live stream. This is episode 28, I believe, of Rangers Review. Myself, you guys know me either as just normally Wardy or Wardy NYM for my baseball channel as well. And we also have Steven, Statboy Steven. Check him out on Twitter. Check us both out on Twitter if you guys have Twitter in the description down below. But big episode today, plenty to discuss. We were kind of waiting to see if anything was going to happen. We believe that an Igor Shesterkin extension was going to happen pretty new deal, I should say, was going to happen pretty close right after when we talked literally a week ago. But now we have things a week later, just about, because the Rangers love to do things on Mondays, which was yesterday. They extend him, re-sign him, I should say. So we're going to be breaking down everything there is to know about Igor. We'll also be taking a look at the latest with Jack Eichel, because we just love talking about Jack Eichel every single episode, Steven. And then we will be getting into Kakko and how he has fared this offseason. And then we'll wrap things up with doing a Q&A for the last portion of today's segment. So before I go any further, I just want to say thank you all so much for everyone that's chiming in. Tyler, Johnny, Google account, Dave, a great subscriber and friend of mine. How are you, Dave? Michael, Brody, how are you as well? NYR Mike, going down the list. Thank you all so much, everyone chiming in. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, if you're watching this live and not on replay and not through wherever you get your podcasts, we will be taking questions towards the end of the show. So hold on to them. But of course, smash that like and subscribe button as we chime in. But Steven, before I go any further, how are you doing today? And how are you feeling going into this week regarding our New York Rangers?
Feeling pretty good. My body has recovered from my fall 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's been a crazy couple of days for me personally. I'm still in the process of unpacking some stuff and new setup again. But this is close to my final setup for at least the next year. Just need to figure out, the final pieces. But you can see an empty spot there behind me where the sticks are. There's going to be a little cabinet there with some Rangers memorabilia. So, but other than that, work's good. Life in Dublin is good. Going to my first Gaelic football game on Saturday.
Nice.
We were able to get tickets, which was shocking because there was an entire lottery system, but one of my friends knows some season ticket holders. So yeah, going to my first ever Gaelic football game on Saturday. So if there's any Irish fans listening in, now you know where I'll be on Saturday. Yeah, other than that, Shesterkin extension, of course. There was some Kakko news on his off-season. And I started my prospect interview series for 2021-22 with the first release today, Evan Vierling.
Perfect. So yeah, we'll definitely add that to the list of topics to discuss as well. And I want to talk after this off air more about that too. But all right, let's just dive right in, folks. So again, thank you all so much, everyone being here. If you're watching this live and not on replay or wherever you get your podcast, but no less, the Rangers yesterday did finally give a new contract to Igor Shesterkin. I think you and I can both agree this was a phenomenal deal. You get him on a 4-year deal at around a 4.66 AAV. Looks like the first year for Igor is going to be right around $3 million. Then it'll be jumping up to $6 million. Then the third year, I believe, is right around $7 million. And then his fourth year, and assumably his walk year, not thinking that he's going to actually leave, but before he hits free agency, he will then be making just under $7 million. I believe around 6.67 or $7 million. So overall, I really like this deal, and it was historic because I believe, according to Frank Saravarelli at least, Igor is either the first or second goaltender in NHL history to have this high, this big of a contract in his first contract outside of his ELC. So, Steven, what was your initial reaction to this deal? Are you happy about it? Do you think this was a smart move for the Rangers? And what do you expect the implications of it are going to have on this club going forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, the AAV is 5.66 million.
Yeah, that's what I said, correct?
You said 4.66, but it's...
Oh, my fault. I meant to say 5.66.
That's all right. That's all right. And yeah, the Frank Saravelli tweet was interesting because, yes, technically he is correct, but I don't really care that much about Shesterkin being the first one to make this much money on a second contract as a goalie, because there's something called inflation. His cap hit is 6.93% of the total cap. Yep. And if you compare that to Henrik Lundqvist's second contract in 2007, he made $4.25 million, which is less than Shesterkin will make on his new deal. But at the time, the salary cap was a lot lower, so that was 8.45%.
Yeah,
Compared
it was a big deal at the time
for Shesterkin. So the Frank Saravelli tweet is interesting, but you have to look at it in context. Cap hit inflation is a big thing, especially if you look at where we started in 2005. I think the salary cap at the time was about 40 or 50 million, and now it's 81.5. It'll be flat for the next couple of years, but still, when you compare today's contracts to the ones back then, Sidney Crosby on a second deal got 8.7 million, which doesn't sound like much in today's NHL, but in 2008, when he signed it, I think it was close to 15% of the cap. It was around 14 or 15%, I think.
Or maybe I'm glad you brought in the context, though. I just want to add that because I never looked at the Saravelli, being the one to explain that in a negative light. I know maybe your initial reaction, if you haven't been following along with Igor in the AHL, is, oh, he's getting paid a lot of money, the most in NHL history after ELC. But again, context is key. It's not like Igor is a youngin. He's proven himself at every single level at this point in his young career now at the age of 25. So really strong deal. 4 more years, which will lead him right until around the age of 29 or so. So my question to you is, because we talked about this in our previous episode, what do you like so much about this deal? And do you think that there's, the way that I feel, where there's strong potential for Igor to then sign that Lundqvist-esque contract once this deal is done for say 7-8 years, whatever they feel is most comfortable?
Yeah, so first of all, the quick correction, I looked up the Crosby contract now, 17.3% of the cap.
Yeah, that's crazy.
When he signed in 2008. So it was just a different time back then, and Lundqvist signed his in 2007. Look, yeah, and that's what you have to do. You have to look at it in context. I think the Shesterkin deal is good for both parties. It's a little bit of a risk for the Rangers, but for years, as a fan base, we've complained about always giving bridge deals to players that shouldn't get bridge deals. We've seen it in the past. We've seen it with Derek Stepan. We've seen it with Chris Kreider. We've seen it with Kevin Hayes. And we're seeing it now with Pavel Buchnevich. If Pavel Buchnevich gets a 4 or 5 year deal in 2019, we're not having this frustration of him being traded for spare parts. If Chris Kreider gets a long-term deal after his first contract expires, we're not looking at a 7-year extension that takes him into his mid-30s that was signed last year. So the Rangers need to figure out when to bridge a player and when to commit long-term. And a team that's been really good at that in the past is the Nashville Predators, especially on defense. The reason they were able to get Roman Josi for such a low cap hit for almost a decade was because they committed immediately 8 years, and it was the right call. The Rangers tried to do a similar thing with Brady Shea. Of course, Brady Shea is not on the same level as Roman Josi, but it was a long-term extension straight after an entry-level contract, and you could see why they were doing it. They were hoping that he would develop into a player that would exceed his cap hit in performance. Didn't really work out for the Rangers, but they still got a first-round pick for it, so it didn't really harm us in the end. But now you see Philip Hedl getting a 2-year bridge deal, Shesterkin getting a 4-year deal, which is good for Shesterkin because he will get his big payday at age 29, and the Rangers will get him relatively cheap for the next 4 years. And at age 29, you're looking at a 7 or 8 year deal, which would take him to 36 or 37 years old after his next contract. So you're not looking at a situation where you have to commit to a goalie until he's almost 40. If the Rangers would have given him a 6-year deal, it takes him to 31, and now with an 8-year deal, all of a sudden you're looking at a goalie being signed until he's 39. It's a little bit more risky that way. So I like it for the Rangers. I really like it for Shesterkin because despite what we all know he can do and what we hope he can become, it is a bit of a gamble for the Rangers. But I think it's a gamble that could pay off. He's played, I think, 47 games in the NHL so far, but there's, of course, an entire career predating that. And yes, I know people will say it's not the NHL, but those games are still indicative of what a player can do. when teams scout players for the draft or even after the draft, they look at progression, and progression comes in in many forms. And the Shesterkin progression in the KHL, the second best league in the world at the time, was great. Same with Sorokin. Sorokin got a $2 million contract without even playing a single game in the NHL. Nobody ever brings that up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't want to be the team that pays for what players have already done. We've been there in the past. We've been there with Dan Girardi and Mark Stahl, most notably, where you pay for past performances. What you want to do is you want to pay for what's coming up. Shesterkin getting $5.66 million on average for the next 4 years. It's a good deal for him. It's a bit risky for the Rangers, but if he develops the way we expect him to, it's going to be a really good deal in maybe even a year. If Shesterkin is top 10 in Vezina voting for 5.66 for 6.9% of the cap, that's good value.
And I think what's also important to take into consideration with his contract and the structure from what I've seen is that normally when we've seen this isn't a bridge deal, but shorter term deals that we've seen when we're coveted RFAs, especially when you think of forwards in recent years, they have had their contracts backloaded tremendously. So by the time it is their walk year, their first year as a free agent, they're going to at least be getting at the bare minimum, hopefully what they made in their final year of their recent contract. But what's interesting about Igor's structure here is that he isn't getting the most in his final year. He's gained it in year 3 of 4 of the deal. So I think that's also appealing to the Rangers side of things as well when it comes to the assumption that these next 4 years go great for him and the Rangers, and they want to have a long-term commitment going into his mid to late 30s, then that hopefully the AAV won't be, even if it's saving you a couple, $100,000, that can be significant for this Rangers team that's only going to continue to build around their core and obviously be going after some bigger names in years going forward in free agency. So I really like the structure for him. I love it that they were able to get him below $6 million AAV, mainly because of his first year being around a $3 million, and then you had that double jump in his year 2. But overall, is there any other things that you'd like to expand on this contract in that on right? Because I think that was another little thing that I noticed personally that was rather appealing.
There's a 10-team no trade clause in the final 2 years.
Yes.
Look, I'm not gonna complain about a player getting a 10-team no trade clause.
No, not at all.
What bothers me is when a player gets a full no trade clause for the entire duration of the contract. Yeah. When you look at what the Rangers are doing, I think the only player that has a long-term deal with a no-move, full no-trade clause for the entire duration is Panarin. Zibanejad's only signed for 1 more year, so I don't count him. But if you look at Kreider and Trouba, I think Kreider has a 15-team no-trade list in his final 3 years. Trouba has a 12-team no-trade list in his final 2 years. So even if you want to trade them, once they get to 2024, you can trade Kreider and Trouba without needing their consent. So this is basically how it works. Some teams ask for a no trade list in the offseason. Some teams ask for it the moment they start negotiating, and some teams ask for it the moment a trade is going down. When Gaborik was traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets, they asked him to waive on the day of the trade, and that's when the deal got done. If the Rangers ask Chris Kreider for his 12-team or for his 15-team no-trade clause, it still gives you half teams in the league to trade him to. It might limit you a little bit, but it's not impossible. So when we look at these no-trade clauses, it's not always as bad as we think it is. The full no-trade clause, that's always going to hold you back. You need a player to waive, but with Trouba, with max 12 teams, Kreider max 15 teams, if you want to trade them because you want to move on from them and generate some cap space, you can do it without needing their say so.
Yeah, and that's a great point as well. And I think overall now, when you look at the Rangers and their outlook for the remainder of the year when it comes to signing players, they only have one left now in which that he is still due for a contract. And I'm not sure exactly what the future is going to hold for him, that being Lubomir Hayek.
I'm not sure Lubomir Hayek is going to sign with the Rangers because...
Yeah, I don't know. It's very, at this point, I honestly don't know. I'm fine either way. I think you and I can both agree there.
I have nothing against Igor Hayek. I met him a few times. Great kid. Always friendly. But I brought this up in the past. When the Rangers season was when the NHL season, I think was it September or October with last year's Stanley Cup final? It was September, I think. Lubomir Hayek was playing in the Czech Republic, and he played for Kometa Brno, his hometown team, and he couldn't even make the lineup for that team.
That was alarming. Yeah, I remember when that happened.
That's very alarming, and I just don't think Lubomir Hayek's future is in the NHL. And the Rangers, if they give him a qualifying offer, they can retain his rights for another 4 years. So it'll be a similar situation with Niklas Jensen or Carl Klingberg, what the Rangers went through. If they decide to move on from him, he can go to Europe and he can hopefully develop a few years and then maybe come back. We've seen it before with players who go to Europe, develop a little bit more, and then come back at age 25, 26, and actually get a decent role on an NHL team.
I just don't. That actually just reminded me of, and not that this is defenseman related, but Dominik Kubalik is a great example. Originally drafted by the LA Kings, was not finding himself going anywhere in the AHL in his young career. Went off. I'm trying to believe, was he playing in the Swiss league? Shoot, I'm trying to remember.
I think so. Let me look it up for you.
Okay, but no less, Kubalik, great example, went to Europe, spent multiple years there, came back to the States in his mid-20s, signed with the Blackhawks, and then the rest is history. So, yeah, we see that with numerous players. It doesn't just go for forwards. It goes for defensemen as well, goaltenders, you name it, it happens. And, yeah, again, to what you've attested to, I have nothing against Lubomir Hayek either, but the analytics don't lie. He was by really abysmal this past year and the opportunities he's been given and throughout his young career. He really hasn't showed up much at all since his handful of games 2 seasons ago when he made his NHL debut. And then, of course, he had his significant injury, which you have to wonder how much has that played into things at this point. Maybe that's a question that could be asked. But no less, the Rangers only have one more player that is due for a contract for this current roster. The rest, you're looking at extension time, really. And that is by far starting with Adam Fox. You know, when are the Rangers going to pick up those discussions? You'd have to think it's going to happen sooner than later.
Yeah, if you look at the players that are free agents next summer, you have unrestricted free agents, Kevin Rooney, Anthony Bitetto. Those two I'm not too worried about. I think Rooney, despite being a valuable player, can be replaced by Morgan Barron in the future, or maybe Justin Richards. So I wouldn't be shocked if they give him a 1-year extension, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they let him go next year. Then you have Ryan Strome and Mika Zibanejad, unrestricted free agents, and then restricted you have Kaapo Kakko, Vitaly Kravtsov, Adam Fox. Adam Fox will be arbitration eligible. Kakko and Kravtsov won't be, so that might drive the price down for those two kids unless they have an Adam Fox type season. Unless Kakko puts up a season where he's like top 5 in Selke voting or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't think Kakko and Kravtsov are going to demand a lot of money on their second deals, which is good for the Rangers. And the last one, Julien Gauthier, of course, is on a 1-year deal now. He'll be a restricted free agent. And then Sammy Blais, who's arbitration eligible. I don't know what they want to do with him. So, yeah, there are some decisions to be made there. And, of course, Georgiev. So Georgiev's on the books now for $2.4 million. I think they're going to get rid of him in the next 12 months. I don't see them committing to an extension with Georgiev.
You know, I'm glad you brought up Georgiev because I was just on another podcast, a smaller hockey podcast yesterday, and I'll try putting the link down below as long as I remember by time this stream has concluded through YouTube, at least. That doesn't go for, of course, wherever you find your podcast here. But I was asked about Georgiev and like my personal stance on if he was part of a deal and is going into Jack Eichel. And we're not going to talk about the whole Eichel situation right now yet, but I'm just saying I would not be against it whatsoever. I think Georgiev, between what has happened with him, everything over this past year, even with the TDA situation, even with him not even being in the wrong from what we believe, no less, there's been a lot of ups and downs with Georgie over this past year. The performance hasn't been there like it was in his previous year and a half with the Rangers. So, and he's a guy that's been rumored for easily, not just this past season, but the season before that, if he would potentially be dealt. And Jeff Gorin, stood his ground and did not let it happen unless it was the right price for him. For the Rangers, you have to look at, they have some young, promising goaltenders that are going to be in the league sooner than later. Tyler Wall, I think we can agree, is probably the most notable.
I don't know. The one I'm most excited about is Dylan Garand, to be honest.
Garand, really? You think that he would have a bigger impact sooner than Wall potentially?
Tyler Wall is a good goalie prospect. With Huska and Wall, you have guys that can be a backup in the NHL in about 2 years.
Okay.
Garand is younger. He's going to need a little bit more to get there. But I think Garand has starting goalie potential in the NHL.
Okay, I'm talking more so on what can be, if you will, quicker replacements for Georgiev over the next calendar year.
Yeah, if you're talking about quick replacements, we still have Keith Kincaid on the contract for another year.
Yes.
If it comes down to choosing between Georgiev and Kincaid as a backup because we have no one better, I don't see them committing to Georgiev. I see them just giving Kincaid an extension for 1 year until Huska or Wall was ready. We have quite a few goalie prospects in the system now. There's still Olaf Lindbaum, who they have to make a decision on next year, whether they sign him or not. Dylan Garand also next year, his rights expire. Hugo Olas, who just went committed to college, so we have 4 more years for him. And then Talon Boyko, who's in the WHL. 2023 is when his NHL rights expire. And then, of course, the aforementioned Huska and Wall in the AHL with Hartford. I think what really hurt our goalie depth, our goalie development this past year, was that the Rangers didn't have an ECHL affiliate.
That's a great point.
As you might remember, the Maine Mariners opted out of the ECHL season.
Yes.
So the Rangers didn't have an option. And this goes beyond their goalies. If you look at a kid like Evan Vierling, he didn't get a call from the Rangers to join the Wolfpack team like Will Cooley did and Matthew Robertson and Braden Schneider, Dylan Garand. But if we had an ECHL team, I think we would have seen some of our prospects play in the ECHL like Hunter Skinner did. Skinner did it on his own, of course. He was approached by the Utah Grizzlies. Is it the Utah Grizzlies? I'm starting to mix up teams. Yeah, sorry. The Memphis Grizzlies are in the NBA. The Utah Grizzlies are in hockey. The Utah Grizzlies, sorry. He played for the Utah Grizzlies in the ECHL. Did really well with them. Won a gold medal with Team USA at the World Juniors, and then joined the Hartford Wolfpack near the end of the season. I think he played around 10 games, had a goal. But that kid paved his own way because he was in the same situation as Evan Vierling. The OHL didn't have a season, so they had to do something. And if the Rangers had an ECHL affiliate, they could have had Tyler Wall or Adam Huska play some meaningful games in the ECHL, because with Georgiev in New York, Kincaid spent some time in Hartford, and if you have Kincaid in net, then your chances for the other 2 goalies, who are your young, hopefully future players in net, their chances were diminished because Kincaid spent some time in the AHL as well. But of course, now we moved on from the Maine Mariners, and now the Jacksonville Icemen are now our ECHL affiliate.
Yeah, what a logo they have.
It's an amazing logo, but I always laugh. I always chuckle a little bit that a team in Florida is called the Icemen.
Yeah, there's definitely some head scratching going on there. They wouldn't be the first team, however, to be either ECHL or AHL team that its name doesn't necessarily coincide with where they're residing.
Like the Calgary Flames.
Exactly. So
or I was actually going over this. Was it with you? We were talking about teams relocating and not changing their name, making it look foolish.
Yeah.
The LA Lakers were in Minnesota, where the Great Lakes are, and they moved to LA and they remained the Lakers, but there's no lakes in LA. So the name
the Lakers just feel so natural in LA. Like if you even try to question it. Yeah.
And now after like 3-4 decades it does, but at the time it didn't make any sense.
LA is the lake hub of the country. What are you talking about, Steven?
But yeah, there's also the Orlando Solar Bears in the ECHL.
Yes.
There are some good names in the ECHL, to be honest, and some really cool logos.
Yeah, no, they very interesting. I love that you can be a little bit more creative, especially when you're not the top team, if you will. They let that go to, the smaller organizations, and if something if it's catchy with the fans, especially, they love it. Everyone
I'm,
runs with
I'm
it.
still upset we lost the Greenville Swamp Rabbits.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, moving
Okay.
on.
Going now to pivoting now from Igor. So again, everyone that's chiming in the live stream, thank you so much for being here for Rangers Review episode 28. Myself, Tyler Ward, Wardy, as many people like to call me, and of course Statboy Steven. Steven, you guys know the drill by now. And if you guys are listening to this live or on replay, wherever you get your podcast, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. But let's pivot now into a discussion that I'm going to let you run away with, because this is a guy that you know far too well, and I'm really curious to hear your stance on, because there has been some reporting that has come out about Kaapo Kakko and how his offseason approach has been to this point. So let me hear all that we should know currently for the viewers that don't know out there about Kaapo Kakko and how he has been going about his current offseason.
Yeah, Kaapo Kakko spent his offseason in Finland, as you would expect. I haven't seen any confirmation that Georgiev is there again, but as far as I know, Georgiev spends his off seasons in Turku as well, because he's a Finnish resident, having played there for TPS several years before moving to the NHL.
Yeah.
But Kakko worked on his off season with Marko Rautala, who is a renowned coach in Finland, together with his dad. Trained with, among others, Mikko Rantanen. I'm going all Pierre Maguire here. People will either hate it or love it. Him and Rantanen spent the off season together. And if you look at Kaapo Kakko now, he just looks like a different person. Like his face, there's so much more meat on him, and
got a lot of meat on Kakko. A lot of meat on Kakko. That's a good thing.
I'm really excited to see what he's going to do this upcoming season. We saw the amazing jump from year one to year two, where his defense was stellar. Now he just needs to add the offense to become almost a Mark Stone type. That's the dream. If he turns into Mark Stone, I'm happy. But he was very happy to be back in Finland, of course. The COVID-shortened season only lasted 5 months, but still being away from your family that long, not being able to fly home, your family not being able to fly to New York to be with you, I think that complicated the season a little bit for Kakko. Remember, when the season started, he was only 19 years old. He turned 20 in February. So he was happy to be back with his family, but he spent all the off-season training, and they also spent, he and Rantanen also spent time with the Finnish national team. They had a training camp, including a lot of NHL players, where they did some drills. They had some on-the-ice practice. So yeah, I'm really happy with what I've seen from Kakko this off-season. Unfortunately, the coverage isn't really there in North America for this, which I think is a missed opportunity. Because especially with Kakko being the second overall pick, you want to see how he's doing in the offseason. But I do as much as I can to share that stuff on Twitter. But yeah, his offseason has been really exciting to follow. And they have this thing. I don't know if there's any Finnish people listening, but in Turku you have these steps. They're pretty famous, where athletes like run up and down the steps, and it's brutal. And there's a picture of Rantanen and Kakko like running up the steps, and you can see on their faces that they hate it and they love it at the same time.
Oh yeah, that's a common workout. I've done that myself.
Yeah.
It's oh my god, your knees are just shot. It burns like all hell, but it's worth it in the end. But
I'm gonna see if I can find the name in the next couple of minutes. But yeah, look, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing from Kakko. I hope he can continue his development, playing under Gallant, a new coach, a coach that in the past worked with Huberdeau, Barkov, Trocheck, who at the time were about Kakko's age. Yeah, I'm really excited.
And I think it doesn't just go with the likes of Kakko. You can even talk about a guy that maybe he's not as defensively responsible, but even Alex Tuch, for instance, during his time in Vegas, Alex Tuch, a big body forward, can be defensively responsible, of course, has a strong shot, decent playmaking ability. It's really interesting when you look at what Gerard Gallant has coached throughout his career, especially most notably in Florida and then most recently in Vegas, and players that have similar attributes to what Kakko is and what us Ranger and hockey fans hope he will be in the coming years, because there's no doubting that his two-way ability is very much there. As we've said plenty of times, the analytics will show that he was easily one of the best two-way forwards in all of hockey last year from a winger perspective. And now you have that down. That's fantastic. When you have that natural ability, which is something that Kakko has always had, and it's a common trait with Finnish players as well. And now you're bringing that over where you can start to heavily emphasis on taking advantage of yourself being a takeaway machine, like a Mark Stone, and actually being more better executing, I should say, when it comes to your offensive abilities. Because naturally, when you're strong on defense, when you're really good when it comes to your takeaway giveaway ratio, you're going to have offensive rushes in your favor. And one thing that we've just noticed with Kakko in his first 2 years and last year, when he had plenty of takeaways, is that he has struggled to execute. Maybe he's feeling he's still too much of a playmaker right now. He's not trusting his shot enough. Those are things that are gradually going to continue to get better for him over time. And the confidence is oozing out of him that we saw in parts of last year. And I fully expect him to go into the season and really to show more so of his full potential. I don't expect Kakko to be a point per game. I'm not expecting that at all. But I do think we're going to see a Kakko that will have a career year point-wise and that is going to continue to have this gradual build-up. Because, again, when you have that defensive aspect to your game locked down the way that he does, the sky is there for you you can easily soar with your offensive production once you can maybe not overthink things a little bit too much. Make sure you're getting opportunities in your top six and on special teams that will continue to come for him after Pavel Buchnevich's departure, especially. So, like you, I'm very excited. I think that this is only the beginning for Kakko, and I hope that other Ranger fans that maybe see otherwise right now are going to continue to grab onto this track.
So before we move on, you mentioned Alex Tuch. I still hold out hope, foolish or not, but I still hold out hope that under Gerard Gallant, Julien Gauthier can turn into that type of player.
Yeah, very, very similar styles as well. They got the build, they have the shot. I agree with you.
Our wings are basically set. On the left, you have Panarin, Lafreniere, Kreider. On the right, you have Kakko, Kravtsov, probably Goudreau. But you're only one injury away from Gauthier getting serious opportunities in the top nine.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to what he can do under a coach that might actually give him a shot instead of holding him back.
A coach that has thrived with players of the similar skill set. That's huge.
And we can go on and on and on. And I don't want to go too much in comparisons because you tend to get tunnel vision. But
yes.
if you look at Huberdeau and Barkov, that's our Kakko and Lafreniere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If you look at Trocheck, that's our Hedl.
Yeah.
If you look at Tuch, in my opinion, that's potentially our Julien Gauthier. Aaron Ekblad, if Niels Lundqvist can be Aaron Ekblad light in his rookie season, I'll take that. I'll take that as a win. I don't know where this is going to lead, but I'm just excited to see this team under a new coaching staff with everything they've learned. And this is not necessarily a jab at David Quinn, although I've been very critical of him in the past. But sometimes a coaching change is just that. We've seen it when we went from Tortorella to Alain Vigneault. When you go from a really strict coach to a coach that's more hands-off, to a coach that doesn't really micromanage, you sometimes see players thrive. If you look at the 2013-14 season, the first year under Alain Vigneault, all of a sudden you have Chris Kreider, Matt Zuccarello just flourish. And I know in part that's also because they were a year older and they had a little bit more experience. But the difference between the end of the 2013 season and the start of the 2013-14 season, to me, with some players, was night and day.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point as well. And I think what's going to be very interesting for us Ranger fans going into this year to really appreciate is just how different this feels now going to be, going from David Quinn these past couple of years, and having little expectations, especially the first couple of years of this rebuild, just seeing how things were going to ride. Now you get, this is in my mind Alain Vigneault 2.0, not in the sense of them when it comes to their actual coaching style, but the sense of actually having an established veteran coach that has had deep runs in playoffs before and that knows what it takes to win. Now, AV, I did not like him outside of his first year with the Rangers. To be quite honest, I felt it was a continuous downfall after year one when the Rangers went all the way to the Cup with how he approached the team and lacked development skills for our young players. But Gallant, the beauty aspect about him is, again, he is known for his young development, developing young players, I should say, and still knows what it takes to win. He has a great track record. And it's going to be curious if you and I ever find out, if he even finds out, I should say, more than anyone else, because I've heard him in his pressers why he was, parted ways with Florida and why he parted ways with Vegas. When you look at their current roster at the time, there wasn't anything drastic to indicate being fired at that point in his career. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he brings to this club, and if those same issues that maybe he had with Vegas or Florida, if at all, arise again. But no less, it's going to be a comfortable feeling actually having someone of Gallant's caliber that can just give you a breath of fresh air on a coach that is competent more often than not, and in both his decision making and his approach to a club that has deep playoff aspirations starting this season.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting change, and yeah, we may have sacrificed some offense and some skill by trading Vigneault. But if Kakko, Lafreniere, and Kravtsov can all improve, they can pick up that difference.
They absolutely can. And I think Kakko is going to be the main guy to look at in that situation. If Kakko finds himself on the top line, is he going to be part of what has always been the KZB, but is it going to be Kakko there? If you look at analytically what Buchnevich, and again, I'm still crushed that Buchnevich is with the Blues, don't get me wrong. I'm understanding it more. But no less, given the return, I don't think anyone can agree it was a great move for what you were given. It wasn't a negative move to part ways with Buch. I think that made sense for the Rangers and what their current viewpoint was going forward. The deal is a different discussion, however. But Buchnevich, who was really strong outside of Kakko, Buch was the Rangers' best forward, two-way wise. That really was noticeable. He's continued to develop throughout his career. Kakko has the defense down. He knows what it takes. He can help you out on, not that you really will need him there, but he can help you PK if you must. And now it's just a matter of him. Can he be coherent with the rest of the top line or the top six and being a solid offensive contributor now going forward? And there's all reasons to believe he can be exactly that with what his direction has been at this point in his career.
Yeah. I found that picture of Rantanen, by the way. I'll send it to you in a DM so you can see it.
Okay, we'll do. But okay, with that being said, folks, to everyone chiming in the live stream or wherever you get your podcast, that is going to conclude the discussion here about Kaapo Kakko. And now we're going to get into something that I know Steven just absolutely loves to discuss. We all do. And that is Jack Eichel as he shakes his head right now.
Do we have to go through this again?
We do have to, Steven. So just buckle up, bite your tongue. We're going to go through this together, okay? I'm not surprised that here we are another week, another Jack Eichel discussion, okay? And whether this is a discussion that's going to be positive or negative will be yet to be seen. But no less, latest on Jack Eichel, and this all comes from Rick Carpinell. If you guys don't know, Carp has been covering the Rangers for quite some time now through The Athletic. Threw himself out with a tweet yesterday before he went on vacation, rightfully so, given the responses that he's probably seen on Twitter at this point, and saying that do not be surprised to see Mika Zibanejad be, a part of a deal that would land the Rangers Jack Eichel. So, Steven, I want your initial reaction to this because I have oodles amount of things I have to say on the matter. So let me hear what all that you have to give.
So Rick Carpinello says that Zibanejad is going to be included in the Eichel trade, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rick Carpinello also said we were going to trade for Giordano, and he also said we were going to reacquire Colin Blackwell. So I don't know. Why would Mika Zibanejad, who has a full no move clause and full no trade clause, waive to go to Buffalo in a contract year? He's a free agent next year. He has a better chance at putting up 40 goals in New York than he has putting up 50 points in Buffalo. So why would he harm himself, harm his chances of getting a big payday by waiving his no move clause to go to Buffalo? It makes no sense to me. I still think the Rangers are interested in Jack Eichel. I don't think the Rangers are interested in giving up what Kevin Adams wants for Jack Eichel. And at this point, I just think reporters are throwing stuff against the wall just to see what sticks.
And this goes in hand with what you've talked about before with Larry Brooks, as we've talked about. Is this a report that is worth reporting in the sense of, is this from a credible source that makes you have the belief that you currently have? Or is this more opinion-based to really kind of stir the pot, if you will, for a guy like Rick Carpinello? And this is nothing personal against Rick, but there's a reason why I don't follow the guy on Twitter, and I haven't for a year now. And if that's not saying anything, I don't know what is.
So when it comes to Rick Carpinello and Vince Mercogliano and Larry Brooks and Molly Walker, I follow them in case there's Rangers news. I don't follow them to see them break the news. You know, they just report on whatever they are given by the organization. If you want trade rumors, if you want to know, if you want to be the first person to know where a player is going to sign, you follow Frank Saravelli, Elliot Friedman, Bob McKenzie, Darren Drager, Pierre LeBrun. Those are the guys you follow for that kind of content. People don't follow me on Twitter to hear me break any trades because I don't have that kind of information and I don't pretend to. People probably follow me on Twitter because I give them updates on prospects. I do my prospect interviews, and sometimes I have a good discussion. That's probably why people follow me. I'll stick with that. I'm not going to jeopardize that by guessing. And that's what this feels like. It feels like people are just guessing. We've heard Larry Brooks for a whole year how the Rangers should trade for Josh Anderson. Look, whatever you want to do, follow whoever you want to follow. But if I could give people some piece of advice, know why you follow a specific person.
Agreed. And I think that's the most important part. You know, for me personally, I have people for every flip of the coin. You know, I have people that I focus on for what I believe are my credible sources that I trust. I follow people for more opinion content that I'm excited to read their articles, things of that nature, of course, and even including yourself as well. Just when it comes to, you know, you discussing with other prospects, among other things. So it all varies. And before I go any further and share my current stance on the Eichel situation or what has been not reported, but at least tweet out by Rick Carpinello for The Athletic, I want to say thank you all so much to everyone that's currently in the stream live, and shout out to Tyler for the $2 donation. Tyler says that if Zibanejad wants $9+ million, he's 100% gone, meaning that, you know, he's going to be pardon me, I believe 100% gone, that he's going to be traded.
I get that, but I don't see Zibanejad being traded to Buffalo for several reasons.
Oh, I do too. And
Zibanejad's not going to waive. I just explained that. But why would Buffalo want to acquire a 29-year-old center with 1 year left on his deal?
Bingo. Okay, so let's get into Eichel. I mean, let's get into the situation more, because I was asked about this as well. The only feasible chance where I believe that Zibanejad could be dealt in a deal for Eichel, and this feels unbelievably slim. For the most part, I think it's a no-go. Yeah, it would have to be something of a three-way deal. That's the only thing that could possibly make sense, where Zibanejad is going to a team that he's more comfortable going with, a team that could use a Zibanejad that is on the cusp or is currently a playoff team. That's the only exception, because Zibanejad, again, no move clause, contract here. Why in God's hell would he want to go to Buffalo, even in a scenario where the Rangers went and completely turn on him and say we're aggressive, that, oh, we want to trade you, we want to burn this bridge as quick as we possibly can? I don't even think Zibanejad would be willing to go to Buffalo in that scenario. I really don't. I think so for plenty of other teams, yes, he'd be willing, but not Buffalo. And in the contract year, from the Sabres side of things, for Kevin Adams, I know that Buffalo has not made the right moves for quite some time now, but you'd have to think that they are competent enough to not replace Jack Eichel, to bring in a Zibanejad that's expiring with not a strong chance of being able to make sure you can keep him. But it's not like Zibanejad is the Zibanejad that the Rangers trade for Derek Brassard years ago. This is a guy that's getting into his late 20s now. You know, none of it adds up for a Sabres team that, again, is in this retool/rebuild. They are not a team that's contending this year, and they're not a team that will be contending next year. So it does not make any sense whatsoever. The only exception I will say, however, is potentially a 3-team trade. And even that just feels so outlandish because the likelihood of that is just slim to none in my mind.
Well, we saw a 3-team trade 3 years ago with Matt Duchene.
Yeah.
That trade was lopsided. Colorado won that trade hands down.
Oh, Joe Sakic had a field day with that. Absolutely.
The Nashville Predators ended up with Kyle Turris, who I think they had to buy out.
They did buy out, and they went to Edmonton.
The Ottawa Senators ended up with Matt Duchene, but they gave up a first-round pick that turned into a 4th overall. And then they traded Matt Duchene at the deadline because they were not a competitive team. They traded away Erik Karlsson. They traded away Mark Stone. It was a mess. I don't know what 3-way trade would make sense where you include Zibanejad in a scenario where you acquire Eichel. Would it be Vegas?
And that's so hypothetical right now. That's the thing. And you need to make sure that you can get a team that can just take on his current cap hit. Because Zippy makes a decent amount of money right now as it is. I believe, what is it, 5.3 mil?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Look, Vegas makes sense for Zibanejad. They're a contending team. He could go there for a cup window. You know, he can be part of that cup window for 1 year, and then next year he can sign wherever he wants. He can come back to the Rangers. Maybe I don't know. Maybe hell freezes over, and maybe pigs fly, and he signs for $2 million a year to come back to the Rangers and be part of our cup window again. But if you're looking at a team like Vegas, yeah, I can see that happening. It makes sense. You know, it would also be poetic because he scored the Rangers' first ever goal in Vegas. But a 3-way trade is so rare. Same with an offer sheet. It's something that happens all the time on social media. It happens all the time in video games. But in real life, honestly, the last 3-way trade before Matt Duchene, I couldn't even tell you. The last successful offer sheet before Sebastian Aho, like successful offer sheet. The last offer sheet in general was Shea Weber in 2013. The last successful offer sheet was Dustin Penner in 2007. So when people talk about, oh, we need to offer sheet Elias Pettersson, you're not going to get Elias Pettersson on an offer sheet. That stuff hasn't happened in 14 years.
And there's a reason why it hasn't. And as hopeful and as excited we like to get, it's just unrealistic.
And the Sebastian Aho situation is is a perfect example. Carolina basically said, "Thank you for doing the negotiating for us. We'll match. We don't have to go to the table with Sebastian. Perfect." But teams aren't going to give up 3 first-round picks or 2 first-round picks, a second and a third, or worst case scenario, 4 fourth-round picks, because you never know where you're going to be in 4 years. You know, the Ottawa Senators were 1 minute away from making it to the Stanley Cup final in 2017?
That was the year that the Rangers lost to the Senators.
Yeah, we beat Montreal, then we lost to Ottawa, and Ottawa lost to Pittsburgh in Game 7. They were 1 goal away from making it to the Stanley Cup final in 2017, right? 2018, they picked 4th overall. 2019, they had a 4th overall pick that went to Colorado. That's how quick your luck can turn around. Teams are not going to give up first-round picks 2, 3, 4 years into the future.
It's not like other sports, especially basketball, because draft picks get thrown around like candy. It happens all the time. Hockey's just a different animal with that. And before we go further, though, I just want to say thank you, everyone, again for being here. And Tyler, with another.
The big difference between hockey and other sports is that in hockey, after the top 3, if you're lucky after the top 5, the draft is a crapshoot.
Yep.
So your top 3 or top 5 picks are so much more valuable. In the NFL, you can trade down from a 3rd overall pick to a 10th overall pick and still get a player that's going to contribute for a decade.
Yeah, well, of course, circumstances completely different. NFL draft, you're usually getting guys that should hopefully impact your team right away.
That's also because they completed college. They're 21, 22 years old. these are kids that at the time of the draft are 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get past the top 3 in every draft year, it's a crapshoot, and that's why teams are hesitant to give up these high draft picks, and why they don't want to commit to giving up these first rounders 2, 3, 4 years into the future. Because there's other examples too. The San Jose Sharks made it to the Stanley Cup final that same year, 2017.
Yep.
And now they've been cracked for 2 years.
And they're going to stay that way. They need to commit to a full rebuild, and they have really bad contracts that they have to deal with.
It took them 2 years to go from a Stanley Cup final to a complete shit show, where the Ottawa Senators got a top 5 pick in the Erik Karlsson trade because San Jose was so bad.
And that became Tim Stützle. Correct?
No, that was the third.
Pardon me. No. That was Sanderson. Yeah.
Sanderson. Or was it? I don't know. I don't know which of the 2 picks was actually San Jose's. It doesn't really matter in the end. But look, teams are not going to give up first-round picks in an offer sheet. Teams are not going to find 2 trade partners to make a trade work. Circling back to Eichel, I still think he's going to be traded out west. And I think it's going to be either Vegas or Minnesota. And if Minnesota is involved, it's going to be either a package including kids like Matthew Boldy, Caden Addison, Marco Rossi, or they're going to go, or they're just going to give up on Kaprizov and cash in right now and trade Kaprizov for Eichel.
And before we go there, because I want to expand on that further on Minnesota in particular, Tyler with another $2 donation here says, I think Colorado makes sense as a third team. Colorado, they have the assets, obviously. They're a team in a win-now stage. I don't think it's too outlandish. I have to look at cap-friendly what they're looking like when it comes to their dollars right now, however, because they just signed Landeskog to that massive extension. So, a part of me just – I'll have to see it to believe it. Let me put it this way, if a 3-team trade happened. Not saying it's impossible. It just really feels unlikely.
Yeah. Colorado is $2.3 million in cap space, right?
Yeah, there's no shot. There'd have to be a lot more moving parts to be had there for sure. Especially with Zibanejad being a rental. How appealing is that from Colorado side of things outside of, obviously going all in this year?
And it could potentially work with Colorado if you have players that have a big cap hit but are still both useful and on the block, so to speak. If you look at Colorado, there's Rantanen, Landeskog, McKinnon, Makar, Samuel Girard. All of them have a cap hit over $5 million. They're not gonna get rid of those. Mm-mm. And then the second group is guys like Burakovsky, Kadri, JT Compher, Eric Johnson. Who wants these players? The Rangers don't want these players.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Vegas, you can at least make a case for Riley Smith being the big part of a package. You can make a case for maybe Jonathan Marsh or so if they want to sweep. If you want to trade a big contract to absorb that Zibanejad cap hit, that kind of makes sense. Colorado doesn't have pieces that A, they're willing to trade, and B, hold any significant value, and C, have a decent cap hit to sort of balance the books.
So there's going to be obstacles with every way to look at it and a potential 3-team deal. But in a nutshell, going back to the original statement here from Rick Carpinello, I would be flabbergasted, to be quite honest with you, if Mika is part of a deal to land Eichel. Because remember that Jack Eichel is in a spot right now. Shout out to Dave Kaplowitz with a $3 super sticker. I really appreciate that, Dave. Everyone, donate hype in the chat if you're watching this live on YouTube. But Jack Eichel needs surgery, according to his agent. This is something that we all knew about. If the longer that he is prohibited from getting a surgery, the longer he's going to be out potentially going into the season. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, if Eichel does get the surgery for his herniated disc in his neck, how is that going to impact his play after the fact? Is Jack Eichel going to be the same player that he was prior to his injury? That's answers we don't have. Those are things we simply don't have answers to right now. And you need to weigh those factors when it comes to making a deal. And that's why everything's going the way it is. And again, it sucks. I feel like we're being a dead horse right now, but those are huge those are huge problems between the Eichel and Buffalo front that need to be resolved before I truly believe that we're going to see a trade happen. And I know that it's been hard to keep Eichel out of, discussions for all of us Ranger fans for the most part, just because it seems like it's been Rangers or bust for a little bit now when it comes to if Eichel is going to be dealt, with the assumption he's going to be dealt. This has been going on for easily the past 6 months to a year now, connecting the two for sure. When is it going to happen? We don't have answers to that. And again, you have to wonder, what is his health going to be like? When can he get surgery? If he will get surgery, all those things go into a deal happening here. And Mika Zibanejad, just from the forefront, does not make nearly enough of a logical sense for him to be part of a deal going the other way. And we've been saying this for a while. We kind of have a
conversation, all this debating, and even Carpinello's tweet. It all rests on one thing before you can even discuss anything. Zibanejad has to waive his no trade clause. And this is what I alluded to earlier. If you have a player that has a 12-team no trade or a 15-team no trade or a 10-team no trade like Shesterkin, yeah, you can work around it. But Zibanejad has a full no trade clause.
Exactly. It's not an easy task.
He can block a trade to any team. So why would Zibanejad want to waive his no trade clause? Because unlike Gaborik, who was unhappy in New York on the Tortorella, Zibanejad's happy. He's smiling every game. He's one of the big players on this team. He's not a player that's being pushed out of the top six like Kreider. He's still the top line center for this team. He's immensely popular with his fan base. Why would he give that up, especially in a career year? Why would he go to a team where he would, like I said, why would go to a team where he would struggle to put up 50 points when he can stay in New York, play with Lafreniere and Kravtsov, or Panarin and Kakko, or Kreider and whoever, and have a legitimate shot at another 40-goal season?
And I think you also have to throw in the fact of, why would the Rangers want to part ways with their top center right now, even with him being a rental, when there's no guarantee on if and when Eichel would be in the lineup? Like that,
Yeah.
that's a massive factor. And for a team that's so emphasizing on, we want to make sure we are a playoff team this year and hopefully have a deep run, you are going to be prohibited, even in a scenario where you land Eichel, if you part ways with a guy like Zibanejad, more than likely, because your center depth is hurt in the scenario where Eichel's not ready for the season start. Like those are obvious factors that I feel like people overlook as well. Like there's no guarantee when Eichel will even start the season right now, and that's not something the Rangers can gamble, given their motto to go all in this year, starting this year, I should say that.
And if you trade away Zibanejad and you acquire Jack Eichel, is the upgrade at center worth the additional assets you're giving up?
Yeah, and that's something you have to ask yourself for sure. And again, Tyler with another $2 donation. Thank you, buddy. Says hypothetically, Kadri would be gone, but reflips. Okay.
Yeah,
so.
I know Kadri would be gone, but is Kadri the type of player that would come back in that trade? The Sabres have no use for Kadri. The Rangers have no use for Kadri.
The only way Kadri would make sense for the Rangers is if they part away Ryan Strome separately.
Yeah. If you make a separate trade for way Ryan Strome goes somewhere else, but we're in August.
Yep.
What team in the history of the NHL has traded their first and second line center in the last 6 weeks leading up to the season?
To then bring in two different first and second line centers.
So you would go, okay, so hypothetically, you would go from Zibanejad and Strome to Eichel and Kadri. I'll take Zibanejad and Strome.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Again, there's
if you ask me,
if it adds up at this point in time.
Eichel or Zibanejad, I'll pick Eichel over Zibanejad. But if you ask me Eichel and Kadri or Zibanejad and Strome, it's no question. I'll stick with Zibanejad and Strome and the assets that I don't have to give up. Look, Colorado doesn't make sense. Vegas might make sense. The Rangers would only get Jack Eichel. The Sabres would get a pick and a prospect from the Rangers, and the rest would come from Vegas, like Nicholas Hague, Riley Smith, and a first, something like that. Or maybe Peyton Krebs, Riley Smith, and a first. But a three-way trade would be fun, though. I'm not gonna.
It,
I'm
it
not
would
gonna.
it would be everyone would be shocked by it. Everyone would be excited, of course. There'd be both emotions, both positive and negative. Again, I'm gonna stick to my guns though and say it isn't happening.
Imagine Drury's first big move being a three-way trade where you acquire a top-line center.
It would be ballsy. I will say that much.
Yeah.
It would definitely get the back pages for sure. Um, Okay, Steven. So now we reach this point in the episode 28 of Rangers Review, just now an hour in. So for the next 15 to 20 minutes, we will be taking questions. So to everyone currently in the live stream, if you're listening to this on replay or wherever you get your podcast, just stay tuned as you hear us answering these questions, of course. So yeah, guys, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns that you would like to ask or share with us, by all means, go for it, and we'll be answering as many as we can for the next 15 to 20 minutes before we end today's episode. And again, thank you so much to everyone that's been chiming in this entire time. We appreciate you. We love doing this, love having Ranger discussions. It's always an exciting time in the offseason. You have to wonder what is next for this club, if anything, for that matter. We are tired of discussing Eichel, though. Well, we very much are. We just want answers at this point, if anything, or nothing at all. Just not enough of this limbo in between at this point in the year. Okay, Matt asks, how excited are you guys for Laffy next season? I'm really excited for Laffy. Absolutely. I mean, I think we definitely saw enough of him in his rookie year, even after having a slow start, to indicate that he's just getting started. He looks composed out there. He looks comfortable, infectious personality, silky mitts. He's going to be guaranteed a top role on this club now and going forward. What can't you love about that?
Yeah, let's also not forget that last season, there are some things that you can blame Dave Quinn for, but it was also an NHL season without any preseason, without a training camp. They had I think a 2-week training camp before the season started, but half the players weren't even there because they were still in quarantine coming over from Europe. It was a mess. The Lafreniere we saw at the end of the season, that's the Lafreniere we're going to see. I'm going to quickly, if you don't mind, I'll quickly look up what his production was in the final month or so.
Sure. And
looking up Lafreniere, and I'm getting Jason Lafreniere, former Ranger.
Yes, the other Ranger, correct?
And he was also a Ranger, yeah.
And wasn't he 13?
I think 15.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I think it was 15 too. Yeah, short-lived. But, okay, so I'm going to answer another question while you're doing your homework there. Johnny asks, why don't the Rangers trade one or two of their defensive prospects for a center prospect? My quick reply to that would be, it's definitely possible. It's definitely something that is not outlandish at all. You look at Julien Gauthier and Joey Keane, prime example. Is that a route the Rangers want to go down again? With, they have a plethora of something and they don't have enough of something else at the time, and getting Gauthier made sense for both clubs. Rangers for certain can do that again. That's something that maybe will be more sneaky, that comes and arrives, that maybe, not enough people were expecting because of Jack Eichel and all these sweepstakes. But yeah, 100% could happen. And now, whether is that going to be a really coveted center prospect that is just on the verge of being NHL ready, because again, this is a Rangers club that's trying to win now and going forward. They're not in the retool phase anymore. And that would mean you have to cough up some of your better defensive prospects that are just on the verge of being in the NHL. Are the Rangers willing to go there, or are they willing to go deeper into their defensive prospects, whether it be the likes of Matthew Robertson-esque and potentially even Zach Jones, or someone just under his level, to get a centerman that is maybe doesn't have the status of being top 6, but could be a solid top 9. They can get creative with that. But yeah, it's definitely a great question. I agree with that, Johnny.
Yeah, and the one team I always come back to when I discuss these hypotheticals is the LA Kings. They have amazing depth at center with young guys like, of course, Byfield, who won't be available, but they have Vilardi, they have Madden, they have Turcotte, they have Rasmus Kupari, who played with Kakko.
They have endless center depth
at different age groups for the national team. Kupari is an interesting one for me. A Matthew Robertson for Rasmus Kupari trade, I could see. Yeah, there's another center that they have. I cannot. I'm blanking on his name now, but LA Kings are probably the team to. Anderson Dolan, I think that's the one. The LA Kings
Yeah,
have a plethora of depth at center, similar to our plethora of depth at defense.
even Akil
So
Thomas, right?
Akil Thomas, that's another one.
Yeah.
You see, we can go on and on and on and on. And the Rangers have Nils Lundqvist, Braden Schneider, Keandre Miller, Zach Jones, Matthew Robertson, Hunter Skinner. It goes on and on and on and on. So there's definitely a win-win trade potentially there. I don't know if they're going there, but that would be my target to get a young center for this team.
Absolutely.
So on Lafreniere's production, in his last 25 games of the season, he had 13 points. In his last 12, he had 8.
Yep.
Just to illustrate that as the season progressed, Lafreniere got more and more comfortable and started contributing more and more and more.
And I think one final tip to give about Lafreniere before we get on to more questions, guys, is when he first came with the Rangers, the first 10, 15 games, wasn't putting on much points, as we know. It was actually on a historic pace with a lack of point production. It was not looking good, even though he looks fine out there. But this is where you can maybe test David Quinn's style and having somewhat of a negative effect on a guy like Lafreniere. Because one thing that I've noticed with Quinn in his development or lack thereof with trying to approach this team is really trying to make everyone unison. There's a conformist mentality that came with David Quinn and kind of making them stray away from what they're commonly known for, what they have been at this point. Alexis Lafreniere wasn't the consensus number 1 overall pick really since he was a kid without a reason. You know, he has his own unique play style. And Kakko, same thing in his rookie year. And David Quinn even attested that after a while, saying that we need to let Kakko play his own game, which was clear that was something that the Rangers were not allowing him to do to the same extent prior. And that where you saw the lack of offensive production. So you'd have to think that under Gallant as well, you're going to have Laffy really get comfortable being his own and show exactly why he has been this coveted prospect for so long.
Yeah, let's also not forget how the Ranger season started. Zibanejad was recovering from COVID-19. His first 15, 20 games were terrible. Then you had the locker room fight between D'Angelo and Georgiev. Then you had the Russian reporter who went after Panarin.
Oh my God, yeah.
The first 2 months for the Rangers were terrible.
Horrendous.
This many incidents usually don't hit a team in a 5-year span, and we had it in 2 months. So if we can go a full season without these distractions, it's going to be huge for a kid like Alexis Lafreniere.
Absolutely. So now getting on to more questions here. Platt, I'm glad he brought this up, Steven, so I don't have to show to you first because we were talking about it before this. Is what are your thoughts on acquiring Dvorak from the Coyotes instead of Eichel? Would it make it a lot easier to re-sign Zibanejad and all the kids? Obviously, he's not on the level of Eichel. I'm not against Christian Dvorak at all, but at the same time, I've personally, for me, and if you're asking for my personal opinion, I felt the Rangers have been pretty much Eichel or bust this offseason. Outside of Philip Deneau, who was a free agent that had made plenty of sense for them, he ended up signing a massive deal with the LA Kings, as we know. Dvorak, sensible, but Jack Eichel is just one of those that you're obviously going to seek out that opportunity because an opportunity to get a top-line center who's still in the prime of his career, assumably, given his injury at a young age still, those don't come available often. And the Rangers have been connected with him for a while. So I think it's Eichel or bust when it comes to addressing center for the Rangers this year. But I could be wrong. So, Steven, what's your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah. Is Dvorak better than Hedl? Probably.
Yeah.
Is it worth the assets to make that upgrade for your third-line center? I don't know. Is he better than Strome? Not at the moment. And we hit lightning in a bottle with the Strome-Panarin chemistry and combination. What are the odds it's going to happen again? What are the odds that another center we bring in is going to play this well with Artemi Panarin? And I know people are saying, yeah, but Panarin is like one of the best wingers in the league. Yes, true. But let's not forget that even Panarin put up career highs, career records in goals, assists, and points while playing fewer games than in any of his previous seasons. So it works both ways with those two. I'm not against acquiring Dvorak, depending on the price. But when I look at targets, I tend to look at I tend to have the opposite approach. A lot of people go, "Oh, I want this player on my team. Let's see how we can make it work." And you get into these hypothetical trade proposals. I usually go like, "Okay, let's say we want to offload Chris Kreider. Where would he be a good fit? Dallas, Vegas, Boston." I think Boston would be a good fit for Ryan Strome with David Krejci retiring. But anyway, Chris Kreider to Dallas in a trade where you might acquire someone like Rupe Hintz, or you trade him to the Vegas Golden Knights and you acquire someone like Peyton Krebs for the future. Of course, other picks would be involved, but that's usually how I would approach these kind of scenarios and thought bubbles. Krejci retires. Maybe the Boston Bruins want to extend their window, so you could trade them Ryan Strome, and you can get a really good center prospect from them in John Beecher, maybe a first-round pick. Not that I would necessarily make that trade, but that's, to me, that is a lot more sensible than looking at teams and go, "Ooh, yeah, I would like this." Nothing against people that want Dvorak on our team. I'm just saying that that's not the way I usually approach these things. But we'll see. We never know what's going to happen. Nobody in 2016 thought Zibanejad was going to be available. So who knows? Maybe they'll come out of left field with a trade for a guy that none of us have even thought about.
Yep. Yeah, and again, there's always that possibility. Who knows? All I will say is if it happens, it's probably a Monday. So always have those notifications on a Monday, if anything, for the Rangers. They've been doing that for quite a while now. But I see a $5 donation here from Brody. Thank you so much, Brody. He's been a great supporter here on the channel and for Rangers Review, the podcast. No question, you guys always cover everything well. Just want to thank you and Steven for entertaining us and hope you have a great summer. Have been doing well this summer. Thank you so much, Brody. I hope the same for you, my friend. Cheers. That means a lot, buddy. I know you've been supporting here for a while now, so I really do appreciate that. Let's see. How would I see a question here from David says, how would you grade GM Chris Drury's draft selection? I feel he made a lot of rookie mistakes and not as well as former GM Jeff Gorton made. I do think that there were aspects to the draft that did not necessarily favor the Rangers this year like they have in years prior, outside of the obvious not having a top 3 pick, because that really wins your draft for the most part. But yes, I do think that Drury will continue to get better with the draft. He's made some recent hires as well that we did not even discuss, including Steven, would you actually like to address that? Because that'll help the Rangers going forward when it comes to young development. Originally from the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm just blanking on the young man's name. Do you recall? Does that happen last week?
Lilly? John Lilly.
Yeah. So Drury's going to continue to build his team when it comes to scouting and developing young talent as well. So the draft, I don't think was fantastic for the Rangers by any means, but I don't think it was terrible either. I think it was more so along the lines of what we kind of first saw in the beginning of this rebuild, because when we look at year 1 for the Rangers draft with Elias Anderson, that didn't work. Hedl was a smart pick. But, again, nothing flashy. Wasn't the best draft, but I wouldn't say it was the worst either. It could have been better maybe in certain aspects, but this was also a year where I will give the exception, given Drury just coming in the reins as GM, having to prepare everything in a short period of time, and also it being the pandemic year where you're having guys where it's so much more difficult to scout because, 1, your scouts can't even be in attendance everywhere, and 2, you're having players that simply didn't play. So those are factors you, of course, have to weigh in your decision-making.
Yeah, let's take it year by year quickly. The 2017 draft, you draft 7th overall Elias Anderson, who didn't work out. You get a 2nd-round pick in return that you use for Will Cooley. Philip Hedl, 21st overall, and then Morgan Barron in, I think, the 6th round, if I remember correctly. If you get Hedl and Barron out of that draft, I consider that a good draft. If you get 2 roster players without having an actual top pick, because 2017, the drop-off was clearly at number 5 with Pettersson. If the Rangers have a top 5 pick, they get Elias Pettersson. We're not having this conversation. 2018, you go into the draft with 3 first-round picks. That's huge. You go into the draft with 2 second-round picks. One of those was used as ammo to trade up for Keandre Miller. You get Kravtsov, Miller, and Lundqvist. It's really hard not to love that draft, but you make it a little bit easier by having 3 picks on day one. And then you get a kid like Lauri Pajuniemi, who was a really good pick in 2018, in my opinion. The rest of the players, it's still too early to say. Simon Kjellberg and Riley Hughes, who knows? 2019, you win the lottery, you get a second overall pick. Great. But the 2019 draft is probably my favorite so far because we didn't have another first-round pick, but in the second round, you get Henriksen and Robertson. In the third round, you get Zach Jones. In the sixth round, you get Adam Ekstrom. And in the seventh round, Eric Ciccolini, which were all good picks on the day. The Hunter Skinner pick in the fourth round was heavily criticized, but even he turned it around. So 2019 is probably the highlight of a rebuild when it comes to drafting. And then 2020 with Lafreniere, great. Schneider, perfect pick. Even though we all wanted a center, but Schneider, a year later, looks like a really good pick at 19th overall. The rest is still too early to call. So you get to 2020, where you talk about trading away your first-round pick. You already traded away your second-round pick for Mark Stahl. So you don't go into the draft with the same expectations. At least you shouldn't. You shouldn't be going into the draft with the same expectations. I really like the Brennan Othman pick. I'm in the minority with that, but I think the kid is a future Kreider replacement in 2024. His timeline to replace Kreider lines up perfectly with his no-move clause expiring. Didn't have a pick in the second round. Third round, you get guys like Gruby and Korczak. Korczak I like. Gruby, I don't know too much about because he missed most of the season with an ACL tear. And then once you get to the fourth round and beyond, it's really difficult to value those picks right now. Last year with Vierling and Berard in the fifth round, we struck gold, in my opinion. This year, we simply don't know yet. But this 2021 was never going to be a draft to define our rebuild. Our rebuild was already defined with Lafreniere and Kakko. I think the draft, I would give it a C+ or maybe a B-. It's not terrible. They didn't knock it out of the park either. They could have done better, but they definitely did not shit the bed.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I want to say thank you so much, Grantilda, I believe, with the $1 donation. That means a lot. And with saying that, though, Steven, that is going to wrap up our Q&A segment here of Rangers Review, episode 28. So thank you all so much to everyone that chimed in this stream live, or if you're on replay here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, it should be coming out either later today at the time of being live at August 10th or at the very latest tomorrow, August 11th. Wherever you get your podcast. So again, thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate you all. Love these discussions. Next week, we'll see what the future holds for the Rangers, if anything drastically changed or not. No less, plenty of things to be excited about as we are getting closer and closer to the conclusion of this Rangers offseason. And Steven, my friend, let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.